Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to give you an update on my mobile communication setup. Welcome back and thanks for being here. My name is Scott, and if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, then you know that my small car is simply stuffed full of electronics equipment. Everything from communications to stereo equipment and maybe some other things. And just when I think that I have enough, all that the car can fit, I come up with some kooky idea to put something else in the car. Next up is some amplifiers. I'm waiting for an opening in the supply chain so I get my hands on the amps that I'm looking for. And when I get them, I will install them and share. But for now, I'm going to cover the setup as it sits right now. So let me start up here in the front with my amateur radios. Amateur radios, what are they, you ask? Most non-licensed people recognize the term ham radio. These are ham radios. Amateurs like to use the term amateur radio because we do work within the bands of the amateur radio service. Amateur radio is the legal term for what we do and what we are. We are licensed amateur radio operators. But I'm going to use amateur radio and ham radio interchangeably here because most people recognize ham radio as what these things are. So here we go. The first two radios I'll talk about. This top radio is a Yaesu FT891. This is an HF transceiver. It operates on the amateur radio bands from 1.8 megahertz on up to 54 megahertz. I've got an antenna that plugs into the back of the car. It's a Scorpion mobile HF antenna. I will talk about that later. That's what I use with this radio. The bottom transceiver, this is an ICOM ID5100. This is a D-Star digital radio, and it operates, it's a dual bander, so it operates on 2 meters and 440, which is 144 megahertz up to 148 megahertz, as well as 430 megahertz to 450 megahertz. That's a dual band radio. And this radio uses antennas that are mounted up on the roof. From outside the car, most people notice this Scorpion mobile HF antenna right away. They do not notice often these antennas that I have on the roof. But anyway, back to the mobile HF antenna, it is not always here, but when it is, this big capacitance hat on the top is the first thing people notice, and it draws a lot of attention. I've actually had it slow down traffic. People at traffic lights stop and talk to me about it, and I don't like talking at traffic lights. But in parking lots and gas stations, I'm happy to answer questions, and I get plenty. I have a separate video on this capacitance hat to explain what it does, and I have a separate video about this Scorpion mobile HF antenna. It is completely tunable and covers bands from 3.5 megahertz all the way up to 18 megahertz is where it goes. With the capacitance hat mounted, I can cover other bands with a whip mounted. All of the cables that are feeding into it come in through a factory grommet under the floor. That's how all the signals get in and out of the car. And you can see a couple of coils on here. I have 3 coiled up wires. These are choked with mixed 31 beads to keep what's known as common mode current out of the car. In other words, it won't allow HF signal to feed back into the car. And there are my connections at the back, the RF connection as well as the antenna controller connection. Moving to the interior of the car. Here are the radios. I discussed the radios already, and you can see the microphones on the door there. I have speakers. You can barely see a speaker right there. I have 2, because my chassis are mounted in the back, I had the remote mount the speakers. And so here is a better look at the remote speakers. I have one on either side of the steering wheel. And then on the steering wheel, I've got this little portable desk with, in this case, a log sitting here and a cordless microphone if I'm working with my dual bander. Here in the center, I have you can see my tablet at the top that is attached to a ProClip mount on the AC vent. That tablet usually is not there. I mount it only if I'm doing a specific activity on the radio bands. Otherwise, my cell phone kind of rides there most of the time. And then below that is my antenna controller. That is a Tunematic TM1. I have a video describing that and how it works and what it does. And then if we move over, this is another desk. This is where I put my laptop computer. And right now you can see I've got a log up and working. And so this is if I'm logging contacts. And then I also do my digital work from here as well, such as FT8. I want to get into some RTTY, RTTY, as hams often call it. In the military, we used to call it RAT. And so here in RTTY instead of RAT is a little new for me. But yeah, that's something else I want to get into. So another digital mode, maybe some WinLink. We'll see. It's HF digital is all new to me. So moving on here, this as we back up and I go up here to this thermometer, this is the lighting here is really terrible, but you can see this thermometer and my YouTuber microphone setup. I'm sharing this other video of it that's got better lighting on it so you get a better look at it. But that is temperature monitoring for my refrigerator freezer, which right now is behind the passenger seat. I like it behind the driver's seat a little better. Here is a better look at my headset. I've got it sitting on a clip right there. That's not often where it's stored. Oftentimes I just have it shoved on the underside of this desk. And speaking of the desk, here is a better look at the desk. You can see that it's got a swivel for my laptop. I've got a separate video about the desk. You can see the filing system there and other stuff. And then underneath, this is where I have some of my other electronics. So here is a Rigmaster plug and play. This is a digital interface for the HF rig. And then those cables there go back to the radio. Moving on out to the outside of the car, let me show you what I have going on in the trunk. And I have a separate video about the trunk setup as well, but let's just zip through it real quick. So up here in the front, this is on the driver's side. This is my 12-volt distribution setup. And again, separate video that goes into detail on how this thing works. It's just too much to talk about right here. There's a voltage regulator for stabilized voltage to my ham radios. And there is the body for the ID 5100 D-Star radio. This here is an interesting network of diplexers that allow me to share 3 transceivers to a single antenna port on the roof. Separate video on that. Here in the middle is my subwoofer. Separate video on that. Here is the chassis for the FT891. All of the digital connections and everything. It looks like a lot going on, but it's not so terrible once you learn how it all works. And then moving on forward, this is my stereo area. So the Rockford Fosgate is a 500 watt subwoofer amplifier. LC2I is for signal processing. And then up there in the front is a Volkswagen accessory amplifier, 5 channels and digital signal processing. And so that, I think I've got a separate video on that. Also, I have a whole list of videos I'll just share with you. But there it is. Oh, there's my fire extinguisher. That's a good head knocker. And yeah, always got to keep fire suppression in the car. Now, as you can imagine, it does get a little cramped in here. There is a saying in fighter jet circles that you do not sit inside of a fighter jet cockpit, you wear it. And that's kind of what operating here is like. This is not an amateur radio station at which you sit. I wear this station when I am operating. And so right here in front of me, I mean, I've got everything right within reach. The computer is right here within reach. In fact, I can bring it even closer if I want. I don't know how well you can see that, but I mean, I can just bring it right here next to, there's my desk here on the steering wheel with my log and my pen. And then here is the computer right here in easy reach. Tablet, pretty easy reach from there too. I don't use the tablet very much. It's more of a watch it and monitor kind of thing. And then the radio's right within arm's reach, super easy. Microphones right within arm's reach. It seems a little awkward to have the microphones here on the door, but it's actually very convenient. For starters, it's great for cable management because when I open the door, the cables pull up and out of the way. So then when I exit the vehicle, there's no cables in the way. And then when I close the door, the cables slack back down, and then I have plenty of room to bring the microphones up to me and use them. And grabbing the microphone off of this hook is super easy, and then when I'm done talking, I can either set the microphone in my lap if I know I'm going to be just talking back and forth with somebody, or I can just take it and drop it back on the door. It's super intuitive. I really like it. This other microphone here is for GMRS, and I use that if I don't really use GMRS so much, and so usually it is just there and off and I'm not doing anything with it. But if I'm traveling with the family and want to have car-to-car communications, then I can use that. And this location, while it's not impossible to get a microphone on and off the door, it is not nearly as quick and intuitive. But if I know I'm going to be talking on GMRS, then I can take these two microphones and swap their location very easily, and then the GMRS microphone becomes primary and super easy to get on and off. And if I think that I'm going to be talking on GMRS and my dual bander at the same time, then I can just take this cordless microphone here, turn it on, and use the dual bander with this GMRS microphone right here in my hand. Now my HF microphone is off over here. I don't use the HF microphone terribly often. Most of the time it is tucked in a drawer under here, but and I also have it plugged in the center here so that I can also plug in my my headset if I want to. And so but whenever I do put the microphone up, I just stick it right here on this little Pro Clip mount, and away I go. One last thing that can't see on this camera, but I will show you another view, is to keep my lighting under control here. I'm parked in the trees, but often if I'm doing a POTA activation or working on the HF bands, I will set up in the open and in the sun. And it can get kind of hot here in the car. And so I've got sunshades that I erect. In fact, you can see some sunlight shining on my shoulder here. But when I park in the sun, I put up the sunshades to block out light and control temperature in here, and they are very effective at that. They also block a lot of light. And so then this becomes a bit of a cave, which is good and bad. It's kind of fun to be operating in my car in broad daylight, but be sitting here in the dark, because it just gets dark in here. So that's kind of nice, easy on the eyes, and it gives me, I don't want to say it gives me privacy. That's not really what I'm after, because one of the ideas behind doing parks on the air, for example, is to be able to interact with the public. And so operating that way does shut me off from the public, but it also protects me from excessive heat. So this mobile station has given me a lot of flexibility. I really enjoy it. There's a fine line between scripting content and shooting from the hip, going by memory. When you script, you cover everything, hopefully, but then it doesn't look quite as natural when you're reading from a script or looking up and down at a script. And then when you shoot from the hip and just kind of wing it, sometimes you miss things. So I missed a few things. I mentioned the two transceivers here. This bottom one here is an ICOM ID5100A. I did identify it as a dual bander D-Star radio. I put up a diagram, a picture to show you an example of D-Star, but I didn't really tell you what D-Star is. And so what happens is if I turn on my local hotspot here in the car, then I can connect to this Raspberry Pi. This is what I did not cover. This is hidden in my center console, and it has a little transceiver mezzanine board on it. And basically I can be, D-Star requires the internet, right? And so if I'm in the middle of nowhere and there's no internet repeaters out there to give me access to D-Star, well, then I bring my own internet, my own D-Star access point, and then I can just switch my UHF side of this D-Star transceiver to low power and talk to anybody, well, not anybody in the world, but anybody on the D-Star network worldwide right from my car. It's a pretty cool innovation. I did mention I don't know if you can see that here, but I have my microphones here on the door, and one of them is for the Midland GMRS radio. And I did mention GMRS. This is a Midland MX275, and it transmits on GMRS frequencies. It does not use channels, I think it's 8 through 15, because those are reserved for handhelds and only half a watt, so why bother with those, right? But it gets everything else, and it does do GMRS repeaters. I do not use GMRS very frequently. It's something that I use if I'm traveling with family and we're in separate vehicles. I've also been asked about which antenna I use for GMRS because there's only one antenna up on the roof. So how do I do it? Let's go up on the roof and I'll tell you. I do have a video that discusses this mount in detail. Brief overview. I've got this crazy diplexer set up. Basically, I have one antenna port on the roof and it shares the 3 radios. I can't use all the radios at the same time, not with this current setup. Right now, for example, I have a Comet SBB15 mounted. This is a tri-bander that covers 6 meters, 2 meters, and 440, which for those of you who don't know, that is about 50 megahertz, 146 megahertz, and 440 megahertz, broadly speaking. It does not cover GMRS. I can connect the GMRS radio to it, and it's got like a 2.5 to 1 SWR, which is not great, but I don't think it will necessarily damage the radio. It's just not going to perform that well. It'll probably be okay for local comms. And then I've got other antennas. Let me talk about those in just a second, because something else I didn't cover was the antenna switch that's in the car. When you watch that diplexer video, it will show you that I basically separate the HF, VHF, and UHF signals. UHF goes to the front of the car where it goes to an antenna switch that's right beside the driver's seat. And that is where I can switch between the 440 from the ID5100 and then the GMRS radio. So I can't work both bands at the same time, but if I know I'm going to be working GMRS, traveling with the family, I will forego the UHF band, maybe D-Star as well, because that's a UHF thing. I guess I could work that with my handheld transceiver. I can do that, but anyway, I flip the switch and now I have GMRS up here at this antenna port. So my other antennas, my favorite antenna is this Diamond NR73 Bravo NMO, which Bravo was for black. And so this is a half-wave antenna. This one also is not ideal for GMRS. And so why use it if it doesn't work where I need it? Well, with this car, it wasn't a big deal with my sedan, but with this car, it could be the long roof. It could be the fact that it's sitting back here so far. Could be the tilt of the antenna. I really don't know, but each antenna I use is a compromise between performance and noise and aesthetics, I suppose. And so when it comes to noise, sometimes I have to choose between an antenna that whistles and one that howls. And then the ones that don't make any noise at all, sometimes are not the ones that perform as well. This antenna, to my knowledge or recollection, does not make any noise, and I think that's because the open coil here is so low to the car, and then I've got a closed coil up here. I don't even know if you could see that off camera or not, but I do like this antenna. Some of my other favorite antennas. I like these little antennas. They're cute. I have a small car, so cute antennas look good on the car, but they don't work as well. This is a quarter wave antenna by Tram. Tram antennas have two problems. One is the powder coat is not very durable, and so it will either fade from the oil from my hands or it will chip and crack off, as you can see here. Another problem with this particular Tram antenna is this antenna accepts 60 watts, and that's often the case with these little antennas. And if I'm operating at 50 watts for extended periods, and I'm talking about, it takes about a year, it seems, and after about a year this antenna won't tune anymore, and I think it just can't really take the 50 watt input over the long haul. So I did not replace this antenna. I kept it just for this video. What I replaced it with is this one. It is marketed by Browning, but Tram I think owns Browning, so it's still kind of a Tram antenna. So I may still have the same powder coat chipping problems and fading problems. We'll see. This antenna is still kind of new. It is a quarter wave antenna, so this one does not work as well. It doesn't receive as weak of a signal as my half wave, and it doesn't put out as strong of a signal as my half wave. So again, all of this It's a compromise between performance, looks, and noise. This antenna does not make any noise. That is one of the most attractive parts about having it. By the way, this SBB15, 6/8 wave on 2 meters, and so it is a gain antenna on 2 meters, and it does perform very well. All right, also in the car here, this antenna here by Comet. This is the CA2X4SR NMO antenna. All of my antennas are NMO mounts except for this SBB15. I use an adapter for it. I don't like using adapters, but these bigger antennas that work on 6 meters and 10 meters seem to only be available with the SO239 connector. So I don't care for it, but I will use them short term. Anyway, back to this Comet. This, I believe, is a half-wave antenna. I will put a correction in the corner here if I have that wrong. And this one is broadbanded enough to tune GMRS. And the antenna works very well, but I think this is what is causing the noise. It is kind of a noisy antenna on this car. On my sedan, it wasn't a problem, but on this car, yes, I get some whistling or howling. I can't remember which. So fantastic antenna, and it works on GMRS. All right, the little micro elephant in the room, this antenna here. This is my WeBoost antenna. WeBoost is a cellular signal amplifier, and so what it does is think about these times when you're out in your car in the, I don't want to say the middle of nowhere, but in sparse coverage areas. And sometimes having a cell phone signal could mean the difference between sitting inside the car or standing outside the car. And what the WeBoost does is it takes a low coverage area where maybe you can't receive the signal inside the car, but this will receive that signal that you can't receive inside the car, brings it inside, amplifies it with an amplifier inside the car, and then retransmits the signal with a small antenna inside the car. In my case, I have that antenna buried behind the center console. You can't see it, but it's there, and it's within, say, 18 to 24 inches of my smartphone. And I use that whenever I am getting poor coverage, and it's been pretty nice. Check out my WeBoost video link up here if you want to learn a little bit more about how that works, and I think I might even discuss some of its limitations. I almost forgot yet another item in this car. This item, it is in plain sight, but not where I can see it every day as I use the car. So it's very easy for me to forget. I don't know, do you see it? I don't see it, and that's why I forgot it. But if you sit up just a little bit, you can see this little magic box down here. What this is it's a headphone switch, if you will. So you can choose one source and then either you know, say one of two sets of headphones. What I've done is I switched this so that I can use it for my Heil headset. And so basically this connection here is going out to the speaker, and then I plug in my Heil headset here. There's actually two connections on a Heil headset for those who don't know. So this connection would be for the hearing part, and then the speaking part would go into my microphone jack that's here in the center console. And so once I have my Heil headset plugged in, then all I have to do is press one of these buttons on and off to switch directly between the speaker and my Heil headset, and then control the volume with the little knob here. It's very handy. When I'm on the Heil headset, I'm isolated and it's just for me. But if I want to invite somebody to listen to the conversation really quick, then I can just flip the switch real quick, and not without having to unplug the Heil and all that other stuff. So it's very fast and convenient, but out of sight, out of mind the vast majority of the time. Finally, ventilation. All of this equipment packed into this tiny space. I mean, just here in the trunk, without the equipment in the space, the trunk space, it's only, you know, it's like 3 inches deep. It is less than 1 cubic foot of free airspace in there. And then once you put the equipment itself in there, we're talking about 1/2 to 3/4 of a cubic foot of free airspace inside the area. Overall, the equipment is very safe, but I like the idea of having ventilation blowing through there to help keep things cool. I have a total overview of that ventilation link to the video right up here. So that's the walkthrough. Let me know if I have missed anything. There is so much to discuss here. See my playlist. I can only link to 5 different videos within this YouTube video. YouTube limits creators to linking to 5 videos. Check out the playlist. I will link it right here if I haven't already linked it. The playlist covers everything. I've got separate videos for the diplexers and the 12-volt distribution, the DC to DC charger, the lithium, so on and so forth. I can't even think of it all, but it's all in the playlist. Go check it out. Visit my website if you'd like to see it all in print, if you prefer to read about it. I can't think of everything else I want to share with you. Feel free to ask questions. I'm always glad to answer, and thank you for visiting and sticking around. Take care.